Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you are joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Michigan. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new picture book. It's called Becoming Charlie. Please welcome to the show, Kelly DiPuccio. Hey, Kelly. How are you?
Hi. Thanks for having me today, Jed. It's great to be here.
I'm delighted to have you on. Becoming Charlie. What an interesting title. And it's inspired, I understand, by a classic children's book. Is that right?
Well, I guess loosely, although the original idea didn't come from The Very Hungry Caterpillar, but of course I know I grew up reading that book. That's how long that book has been around. So yeah, I suppose that once I had written the story, I, understood the connection that people might make to it. But I kind of think it's a little bit of a modern take, a different take on the theme of caterpillars and butterflies. The idea actually, the very first little seed for the story idea was about over 25 years ago, when my daughter was in preschool. And she had come home, I picked her up, and she was crying and so upset. And I said, "What happened?" And she told me this story about how she pulled out of her little backpack a picture she had colored of an apple, and she had colored the apple black. And apparently her teacher used that opportunity as a teaching moment to tell her what she had done wrong. And so my poor little 4-year-old daughter I think she felt humiliated or ashamed. And it made such an impression on her. And I'm sure the teacher meant absolutely no harm in this exchange, but it really left an imprint on my daughter about, and it wasn't like the assignment was, because I saw the sheet, it was just a coloring sheet. So it didn't say color the apple red or color the apple yellow. It was just a coloring sheet. So that just kind of upset me as a parent that this, was going to make such an impression on her and her young artistic mind and creativity. And I just felt like there was a better way. Oh, look, a lot of apples are red or yellow or green, but you've created this black apple. Tell me more about it. And so that just kind of stayed with me for many, many years until the idea for Becoming Charlie was born.
Yeah. It's fascinating, the little things, and I don't think that we realize, and the pandemic helped me kind of realize this more. Little kids, their lives are so new. And so a little thing yo, kid, apples aren't black. While it's something that doesn't even register for most of us who've lived, in my case, almost 100 years, it's a tiny blip. For a little kid, that's a huge part of their life. When you're 3, 4 years old, the time that the teacher takes to say, "Hey, you did this wrong," that's a big chunk of their life. And I think if we took the time to understand that, maybe we'd put a little bit more thought into all the interactions we have with those little ones.
Yeah, absolutely, because they are so impressionable and they're learning about the world in their own way. And so when I wrote Becoming Charlie, that was kind of the fire behind it was this idea that there is no one path to learning or to becoming who we're meant to be. And it's, it kind of speaks to this rigidity that's in sometimes the educational system, that, there's, the standardized tests, and there's, the grading system. And I mean, I don't want to, turn this into a whole big conversation about the educational system, because I know that everybody has really good intentions, but I think that sometimes in that, there are kids who just kind of fall through the cracks, the dreamier kids, the kids who maybe have some learning differences that aren't acknowledged. And so that's who Charlie is in this story, is a caterpillar who is very imaginative and has a hard time focusing on the rules of becoming a butterfly. And I think there are a lot of kids like that. And I know I was one of them. So it kind of also a piece of me is in the story. I when I go to schools and I talk to kids about, writing and ideas and inspiration, and of course we often talk about art, and I share with them this cartoon series I was working on when I was in elementary school, and it's called Vegetable Hospital. And it's inspired by the soap opera General Hospital. But in my little hospital, there were fruits and vegetables. And so I loved art when I was a kid too. And I was so excited about going on to middle school, because then I could take, art classes. But then when I got to middle school, middle school's a tough time for a lot of kids. And we were always comparing ourselves to our peers and not necessarily feeling good enough. And so when I was in those art classes, I started to compare my art to what some other kids were doing, because there were obviously some really amazing artists. But there's so many different kinds of artists, right? Just like there are different kinds of writer and different kinds of people. But that I was the kind of artist who, when it came time to draw the still life fruit bowl, like I wanted to put eyes on them and a mouth and make them talk. But that wasn't encouraged or fostered in me. And so I just kind of told myself that I can't draw, because, I couldn't draw like a face, like a portrait, like some kids could do. And so I really, stopped loving art in terms of, my creating of art, because I felt like I wasn't very good at it. So, and that was just, I think, again, just celebrating, our uniqueness and what makes us different, and what, standing and being, just our own unique, wonderful selves, and really celebrating that fact.
You mentioned how the education system can be a little bit rigid with the standardized testing and everything. And I think part of the issue for a lot of kids is that we kind of have this yin and yang. It's like, on the one hand, our society wants to be able to feed everybody into this system that just churns out people that are perfect and just fit in. And on the other hand, we realize that that's very unrealistic, and that's not going to happen. And the way that our society has changed, that's not going to be real helpful in 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, because I think that it can, crush some of that creativity and the imagination, like everything starts, every invention there ever was began with imagination. And, I think that, when we can find any opportunity we can to encourage kids to, embrace their imagination, and like, sometimes when I talk to kids at school, they're like, that's not real, or that's made up. But the book itself started in my imagination, and now here it is, a physical, tangible thing. And that is true for everything. So I really believe that, the future is, should be, and I'm not saying that, kids don't need those core studies, and we need to have, well-rounded kids and learn everything. just expose them to all the different things, but, to also honor, their individual interests and try to find ways to encourage those free thinkers or those dreamers.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent an awful lot of time in the hallway outside my middle grade classrooms because I didn't fit in. Mm-hmm.
I think that's true for a lot of creative people that, we didn't necessarily feel like we fit in. And so we created our own worlds, through our imaginations and through our art and through our storytelling.
Yeah. The kind of conversations we can have with our kids as we're reading Becoming Charlie, do you think a parent needs to be as kind of explicit, just letting their kids know, hey, you can be whoever you want to be? Or do we just kind of experience the story and just say to our kids, well, how cool is Charlie? And let the kids figure it out themselves.
Yeah, I always think that allowing the child to lead is really the best approach for really any book. Kind of meet them where they're at and see if they have any questions. And, and this is really a multi-layered book. A lot of people, you could interpret it as gender fluidity. You could interpret it as the creativity. You could interpret it a lot of different ways. But it really just kind of speaks to, the fact that we want to encourage, our young people to become their authentic self and however that looks. So I'm a big proponent of just, sharing books and then just asking kids, what did you think of that? Mm-hmm. And kind of following their lead with any questions they might have or comments.
Yeah. I love that question to our kids. What do you think? Because not only does it give them a chance to tell us and start these conversations, but I really think that that question empowers our kids. It lets our kids know, because believe it or not, as parents, as caregivers, we are, in our kids' eyes, the most important people in the world. They love us. They want us. They want our approval. They want our attention. And wow, when we say to them, I want to know what you think because I value what you think, I think that's incredibly empowering.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I'm also talking to kids about reading, I know there are a lot of kids in my audience who don't love reading, and for whatever reason that might be. And I always tell them, maybe you just haven't found the right kind of book for you. So, whether it could be a graphic novel, whether my son was a nonfiction reader when he was in elementary school. He just devoured books about history, and now he's a history professor, So, I think asking them, what they thought about a book and just so that they know that, everybody has different opinions on books. And just because, someone else likes it doesn't mean you necessarily have to like it. And you may have other preferences. And that's the beauty of it. That's why we have so many different books with so many different writers and artists, because we are all unique in our preferences, and giving that power to the kids to help pick and choose. I have been in public libraries before, and it kind of like crushes my spirit a little bit when I see young kids like pulling books off the shelf and saying, I want this one. And then a parent will veto it. And, and I just think that, yeah, sometimes maybe it's a little bit above their, age level or something. But I think, if you choose the right section of books, in terms of, their age level, and giving that freedom to choose and letting them decide, whether that was a good fit for them. But just kind of giving them that power, a little bit of power over their choices.
Yeah. You mentioned something in what you're speaking sparked this idea in my mind. You're talking about there are some kids who don't like to read. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that happens when it comes to reading reading, because it's kind of like it's an exercise. This thing. We have to love to read. I don't know if anybody sits down or any kid sits down and thinks of themselves as a TV watcher, but every kid watches some kind of screen. Mm-hmm. They don't like every single show that comes on, but they appreciate the fact that there's this device that allows them to enjoy a story.
Yeah. Maybe
one of the things that we can do is, because I think labeling a kid a reader is a really awesome thing, but maybe there's a way that we can kind of change the perception so kids don't have to think of themselves as a quote-unquote reader, and they can just think of books as this medium for them to experience a story that they could fall in love with.
Yeah, I love that because, for the kids out there who maybe, reading is a struggle or they have some, reading disabilities or setbacks or challenges and they can shut down kind of because they feel like, well, I'm not a reader, so I'm just not even going to participate in that. And, one librarian approached me, and this was a couple of years before COVID, and she said, you know what we really need? We need books that look like they're for older readers, but the reading level is younger. So they, because some of these kids, want to be like their peers and they, want to check out all the same books, but maybe their reading level isn't quite there, but they don't feel like they can go check out a picture book maybe. So they end up checking out these books that just aren't a good fit for where they are at. And I think that's part of the problem too, is that, those kids who say they don't like reading, again, maybe they haven't found the right thing, or, maybe they just haven't, been encouraged in the sense that they find the kind of books that can help foster that love and want them to keep reading more. I think that's why series, like Diary of a Wimpy Kid or whatever, because it's kind of like, the Pokemon cards or whatever. It's like collecting them all. Mm-hmm. Like there's a sense of achievement when they do that. And, so it's a really big conversation, and, I don't know that there's one way, and that's kind of what Becoming Charlie is about. There really isn't one way to becoming who we are intended to be or want to be or need to be.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you share with kids, when you're speaking to kids, the fact that this story, Becoming Charlie, it was 25 years in the making. And if you do, I'm wondering what kind of reaction kids have.
If I think, wow, you're really old. That's probably their first thought. I haven't yet, because the book doesn't come out until May 2nd. And so, I do, in the last couple of months, I've, shown the kids the galley and, mentioned that it's coming out, but I haven't really got into, the background of the story. I'll be doing that more in the future, when the book is published. But, I would be curious to hear what they had to say about that. Another interesting little tidbit about Becoming Charlie, I don't encourage this for the writers out there, but I pretty much wrote it in a weekend. And, not that it wasn't, revised, it was revised a little bit, but I went on this solo trip to New Mexico. This was back a number of years ago. I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. And I went and I did some meditating with some female monks in a monastery, and I went to this amazing place called Star Dreaming, where they have crystal labyrinths. And I also went to like one of the oldest churches in the country that had this dirt that was supposedly like miracles happened and people were healed. Like every day was something different. And I call it, instead of like eat, love, pray, it was kind of like my pray weekend. But that's when Charlie was officially born there. It was a long time in the chrysalis. Let me tell you that, before I actually wrote the story. And then interestingly enough, like once the story was written, it sat idle for a long time. And I think in part now I know why, because I believe the story was really waiting for the perfect artist, and that artist is Love is Wise. And they were just the perfect choice to bring this story to life in pictures. And they're pretty young compared to me. I'm old enough to be their daughter. I mean, to be their mother. So I think that they just had to wait until they were ready. And so it's a perfect pairing for this story. And it just kind of all feels very magical to me, how it played out over a very long stretch of time. So, I mean, I think in some ways this can be encouraging for writers out there, either whether they're a young writer or a seasoned writer. Some things just take time, and there is no, one set path for stories to be published or for kids to become, who they're meant to be.
Wonderful. Well, this is it. It sounds like such a fun book and such a great way to have some wonderful conversations with kids. Where can people go to find out more about Becoming Charlie and find out more about you?
Well, thank you. Well, it's published by Knopf Publishing, which is a division of Random House. So you could go to their website. You can purchase it in all major, online places. You can go to your wonderful independent bookstore, and if they don't have it, please ask for it. My website is kellydepuccio.com, and I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, so people can, look me up there if they have any questions and want to find out more.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Becoming Charlie, great new picture book from our guest, Kelly DePuccio. Hey, Kelly, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Judd. It's been great. Thank you for having me today.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and we hope that you'll join us for the next exciting episode of the show. To make sure you don't miss a moment of the show, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks going out to my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Jordan Saley, Will Cheever, Cassandra Masonet, Stephanie Davila. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.